day. And I have discovered the way Dominion actually distributes the votes. And it does fraction magic, which is, I'm sure many of you heard about it already, but it actually transfers fractions between precincts. So, this is the original data from the New York Times data feed. You'll see this starts at November 4th at 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning. That's when everything went crazy, remember? And see, you'll get dates all the way up to this is November 7th. And somewhere in here there's like November 9th. So it's an entire week of data. Every timestamp of every tabulation for the total votes, for Biden's votes, and Trump's votes. Now, Biden's votes and Trump's votes don't always add up to the total because you have a third-party candidate. And I discovered that the fraction logic, what it does is if it sets a specific number of votes that Trump is allowed to get, an integer, out of a total number of votes, and then it puts a minimum on Biden, and then the remainder can be split evenly between the third-party candidate or to Biden. So I took only Philadelphia, Philadelphia's timestamps, and then I sorted them by it's called the major ratio. The major ratio is Trump's votes divided by the total votes. Okay? The second way it was sorted after the major ratio, the second priority was the date and time. And then by the precinct. Hold on one second. Okay, so I found a lot of irregularities. I'm only going to show you 9 exhibits of these irregularities. But there's hundreds and hundreds of them just on the day of November 4th. So this data is only Philadelphia's data on the day of November 4th. See, this says 11:04. It's all November 4th. Now there's 90,000 rows. There's 90,000 entries for November 4th. For Philadelphia. And before I get into the Dominion vote switching, let's just look at something that's statistically very strange, even in this sheet. So, remember, there's 90,000 rows, and it's not until row 40,000, that's half the sheet, until Trump even receives 10% of the votes in the precincts. It's not until row 60-something thousand, 65, 63,000, until Trump starts to get a quarter of the votes. We're already 2/3 down the sheet. Trump doesn't get 1/3 of the votes until row 70,000. He doesn't even start getting 50% of the votes until near the end, around 80,000. Then row 80,000 to 90,000. The last 10,000 rows are the only entries where Trump receives more votes than Biden, and by very, very little. So we're going to look at some particular exhibits here of the shenanigans that I found. And this is how I have finally figured out how Dominion works. So Exhibit 1. This starts on row 32,249. Okay, sorry. It starts on row 8,300. This is the first exhibit. November 4th, Philadelphia. So, 4 precincts at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. They report a ratio of 1 to 48. So Trump gets 1 vote exactly for every 48 votes. That's this right here. So now that's possible. So at first there's nothing weird about that. You have 4 precincts that reported. What makes it weird is that this ratio of 1 to 48, when it stops, because it eventually should stop, and it stops at 10 o'clock, it stops at 8 o'clock in the afternoon, 8 o'clock p.m. The original precincts that this ratio of 1 to 48 were occurring in, which was precincts 613, 5018, 5026, and 5923. It transfers that ratio of 1 to 48 to precinct 17-6 and 28-16. And the difference in time is less than 5 minutes. So we're to believe that these 4 precincts that held this ratio for many hours, which is normal because they didn't update the tabulation yet. When they finally update near the end of the hour, 8 o'clock, the exact same ratio appears in 2 more districts. Now, if this was the only example in the whole spreadsheet of this happening, with this very short time interval, then I wouldn't be making this video. So now we're going to look at another exhibit here. And this one is really, really suspicious. We see at 7 o'clock in the morning, precincts 12-4, 12-8, and 60-13 report they have a 1 to 18 ratio. So Trump gets 1 vote exactly for every 18 votes here. Exactly. It's not even a fraction. So that's at 7 o'clock in the morning. At 9 o'clock in the morning, these original 3 precincts, 12-4, 12-8, 60-13, that ratio gets transferred in the same hour to these 3 precincts. So basically on the next global update, citywide, it transfers to precincts 13, 23, 36, 51, 7. So that's at 9 o'clock, 9:30. That stays that way until 2 o'clock, 2:30. Then these 3 precincts, within a 10-minute time, so this is the global update, okay? When it updates globally, the whole Dominion software across the entire city, it transfers that 1 to 48 ratio from these 3 precincts into 1216, into District 1216. Now, if there was many hours between this same ratio occurring, there would be nothing suspicious. You're going to have a ratio of 1 to 48 occur multiple times. But they shouldn't be within 10 minutes of each other. Or generally within the same hour. That's what makes it suspicious. So now precinct 1216 holds that ratio until 10 o'clock at night. And it transfers it within the same 5-minute interval to precinct 4710. What would have been more normal, for instance, is if precinct 4710 got the same ratio earlier in the day, and then both of those precincts were reporting that number, meaning that this one hadn't updated. But since what you see here is that there's almost no time difference between these two precincts reporting the same ratio, so it actually transferred the fraction 1 to 18, one vote per 18 votes, Trump to the total, to this precinct 4710 at around 10 o'clock. And then stay that way until midnight. And wait until I start, tomorrow I'm going to analyze this not just for November 4th, but for every day of the week. I'm going to find all the examples, by the way. That's Exhibit 3. Okay, I thought I had 2 exhibits there. I did. It's just up here. This is the 3rd exhibit. So this is a ratio of 4 to 65. 4 to 65, the greatest common factor of the denominator, which is the total votes, is 13. And we see that precinct 26 at 7 o'clock in the morning holds that ratio. Then on the next update, it transfers it to precincts 20. I should put this in gray. It transfers that ratio simultaneously of 4 to 65, which is very unusual because of the prime number 13 in the denominator, to 4 different precincts. So at 7 o'clock it starts with that, which is fine. You have to start with something. But then it transfers that ratio all at the same time to these 4 precincts. So look at Exhibit 4. Exhibit 4, the ratio is 3 to 48. And we see that precinct 3417 holds this ratio from 7 o'clock in the morning until 9 o'clock. And then at 9:30, this seems to be the theme. It switches around 9:30. Right? It starts at 7, and then the ratio starts at 7 o'clock, if you go back in the video and listen. And then the next switch happens at 9 to 9:30. So it transfers the ratio 3 to 48. That means Trump gets 3 votes for every 48 total. From precincts 3417 to precincts 1112 and 3636. Then at 3 o'clock, it transfers that ratio from 1112 and precincts 3636 within the same global tick of the whole city, about 10 minutes, to precincts 16, 8, and 25. Then at 10 o'clock at night, precinct 6001 gets added to this ratio. Now that's actually not suspicious. Believe it or not, that's actually a good thing. That works in the favor of our adversaries. Not the whole example here, this whole exhibit, just this part of the exhibit. So that means that precinct 61 got this ratio of 3 to 48 towards the end of the night. And then it got lumped in with the other 2 precincts, so that no transfer has occurred yet. We just added a precinct. So it's perfectly fine for this extra precinct to come in the middle of nowhere with that ratio. If you go over to the global sheet, since most of it is okay. That's generally what you see for these things. So we give Precinct 6001 the benefit of the doubt until we notice that all three of those precincts, 16, 8, 25, and 61, simultaneously stop reporting that ratio at the exact same time. And that's near the end of the hour at 10 o'clock. And then it transfers that ratio to the precincts 43, 9, and 52, 14. And it stays that way until midnight. So we started with Precinct 6001 having the benefit of the doubt of being the only legitimate entry in this fraudulent exhibit. And then it turns out that it's actually part of the fraud. That's sad. Okay. Let's go to the next exhibit. Again, we start at 7 in the morning. We have a ratio of 4 to 63. The greatest common factor of all these columns is 63. That's just really weird. But anyway, so we have this 4, that means Trump here again is getting 4 votes for every 63 total votes. So at 7 o'clock we start, and then again at this 9 o'clock to 9:30, you have this global update, and it transfers this ratio to these two precincts. So from 6111, that holds the original ratio, 4 to 63, transfers to 13.5 in precinct 6122. 1305. Seven in the morning. 7 to 40. So it's switched here somewhere. Okay, so this is the first block. Transfer happens here. It's too dark for the video. So this transfer happens at 9 o'clock in the morning, at 9:30 to these two precincts. Again, it's that same timestamp of 9 to 9:30 around the time of the global update. Just multiply it by 1. Okay, so this is how I think it works. Get rid of all this. I think Dominion needs a certain amount of votes it needs to flip. Total amount to flip. Okay? And let's say that it needs to flip them at a ratio because Trump has such a huge margin. Let's say it needs to flip them. It needs to make sure that Biden gets about 66 votes to every 30 votes, every 33 votes that Trump gets, with 1 vote left over for a third-party candidate, or it can just be added to Biden. And what it does is it splits into blocks. These fractional blocks. What was there, 9? So let's do the 9 exhibits. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now there's more, obviously in this gigantic sheet, these oddities happen many, many times. There are many more exhibits, hundreds of exhibits in here, I would imagine, where you have ratios being transferred. But for the sake of this, of my theory, we're just going to pretend these are the only 9 ratios that got transferred on November 4th. So it says, we're going to take a certain ratio. So this box will have 1 to 48 ratio of ballots. I'm just going to kind of make the numbers up because I don't want to keep going back to the machine too much. 4 to 65. So X equals total amount to flip. Actually, we'll just read them all. 3 to 48, 4 to 63. And this wouldn't be very hard for a computer to do. 4 to 63. 5 to 31. I purposely didn't want to make them the same size. I just sort of dragged the cursor because they're not the same size in reality either. 1 to 6, 1 to 5, 1 to 4. So what I think it does, I'm pretty sure this is what it does. It says I'm going to take the total amount of votes that needs to be flipped, and I'm going to separate them like this. So it will split the X into 9 parts that it needs. So let's just say to make up the amount. Biden needs 100,000 votes. Let's do something that goes with the ratio. He needs 200,000 votes. And Trump needs 100,000 votes. This is how it needs to change the margins. So it redistributes the number 200,000 and 100,000 into these boxes in accordance to these 9 ratios. And order, and then, okay, so what it does then, right, and this is where it gets really sadistic, it then says, so we're going to take just one of these boxes, we'll do 2 of these boxes. It says for the box 1 to 48, we're going to split that into, let's say, 3 precincts. We'll do the 4 to 65 because that's like the weirdest number. So this is what the minion does. It says I'm going to split this into 3 precincts. And I'm going to change the amount of votes that come in. And then when there's a global update, it says I don't want to look suspicious. So I'm going to transfer the workload of this ratio 4 to 65 to 2 other precincts. So it goes from 3 precincts to 2. And then it transfers the ratio again. So this is time going down. Says, okay, well, we we still don't have as many votes yet as we need, so we'll transfer it to two more precincts. The amount of precincts it transfers it to is irrelevant. So I'm going to transfer this ratio to these two precincts. Then I'm going to transfer it to, we'll do one more branch, let's say to 3 new precincts. So these branches are what's happening over time. So it passes it through all these, transfers these ratios to these precincts, these sets of precincts over time. So let's say, so 4 to 65 means Trump needs, we take that number 100,000, right? 4 to 65. 4 divided by 65, I have a handheld calculator in front of me. It's 6.15%, so times 100,000. So the computer knows it needs to get in total 6,153. Not exactly sure how that works there. Let me take a look. Oh, I see. 4 parts of 65. Well, it wouldn't be that complicated, but it's going to distribute. So we're just going to have to make up the number here. That's 4 to 65. So let's just multiply it by 50. So we need to get 200 votes for Trump in this box here. And needs to get 3,200 votes for Biden. Because that's the ratio. So that's what Dominion is trying to get into this overall red box of 4 to 65. That's just a hypothetical. And when the votes finally add up in a way to where Trump gets 200 total over time, when Trump hits around 200 votes and Biden hits around 3,200 votes, it then stops that ratio. It doesn't need that proportion anymore because it milked this ratio of 465 for everything that for all the votes that it needed. And then this box would now be satisfied. So now we'll put, now it's satisfied and it doesn't need that proportion anymore. So again, let's go over how I think this works. So you have a total amount of votes you need to flip to catch for Biden to take out Trump's margin. So let's just say hypothetically it needs 200,000 votes. Then you'll copy and paste the dates you want. So to say you want all of Pennsylvania, you want all of Philadelphia on November 4th. That's the segment you want after you sort it into a new spreadsheet. And you're going to create an array formula that divides Trump's votes by the total vote. Then you're going to resort the data again by that major ratio that you entered, then by the date and time, and then by the precinct. And that's how you get this information. The same way I got it. Alright, I'm going to close the video and start uploading.